This video is sponsored by Game Toppers. Turn your own kitchen or dining room table into a premium portable game solution at a fraction of the cost. Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 757. Today we're going to talk about Oathsworn Into the Deepwood. This is from Shadowborn Games, designed by Jamie Jolly. This was originally a Kickstarter game, and at the time of me recording this video, it's also back on Kickstarter for kind of a reprint and a little bit of an update. So I will have a link to that Kickstarter below. What this game is kind of a big epic RPG style sort of campaign. Each game mode, I think there's 20 or 21 different scenarios you can play through. Each of those scenarios basically has a story mode and then an encounter mode. The story mode will take you about an hour. The encounter mode will take you about 2 hours, kind of give or take. And so you'd be playing through this. There's 12 different heroes you can choose. The story mode can be driven by kind of like a flip page, Tales of the Arabian Nights, choose your own adventure style thing. But it also has an app, which all the app really does is kind of narrate a lot of that text for you, because there's a fair amount of text. And one of the actors from the original Game of Thrones show, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, he does an excellent job narrating that campaign stuff. So I'm kind of reviewing it here beforehand, but there's that part of it. I would definitely recommend the app over reading it. And so you'll kind of make some choices there. Some of those choices will affect then the next encounter mode that you play through, and that's kind of like a boss fight. It's like a kingdom death monster, death may die kind of thing, where it's a really sort of souped up, glorified giant boss battle. And so let me go down to the table. I'll show you a lot of the components. I have here kind of the mystery chest version, which has 2 extra boxes of miniatures, which I'll explain. You can also get kind of a standee version, which is a little bit cheaper, a little bit more economical in terms of storage as well. I don't have any of that here, but I'll explain that. And then we'll go down and talk through some of the mechanics. I'm not going to do like a really exhaustive how to play or anything, because there's actually some YouTube videos and some series that somebody put together, which I'll link below, but they're also taken and sort of chopped up and put in that app as well. So if you want to kind of reference that and go through that, that was one of the ways I learned how to play the game, in addition to reading the rules, was going through those videos, and they're extremely well done as far as that goes. And then, so I'll have links to that. But I'll give you kind of a general sense of it and all that kind of stuff, and then we'll come back to my talking head, and I'll tell you what I think. Oh, and before I forget, I want to make mention of this multiple times so nobody gets caught. I will have spoilers at the end of the review. So it's a little bit of a spoiler to say I like the game. It's very, very hard to talk about concretely and clearly about why I like the game without spoiling stuff. So I will definitely timestamp that and give big old heads up and all that stuff if you don't want spoilers. But I think it really conveys why I like the game. So spoiler for the end, whatever. But let's jump into it. Okay, you can see I've got the main box open here, and like I mentioned, I have the mystery chest version, which comes with 2 extra boxes. Now, all the gameplay stuff you need is in this box, but through different moments in the campaigns as you go through the different scenarios, it will tell you to open either an envelope or a mystery box. So if you have an envelope, you will have envelopes in this main box, and you'll get plot standees and stuff, which will represent what is known as miniatures in the mystery box thing. So these are the miniatures from the very, very first scenario. So no big spoilers. This is, this rat person there is on the very front cover. So it'll tell you, go open mystery box 1. You pull this rat out. It's got a nice little sort of vacuum pack thing in there. And then you've also got these little rat minions that go along with it there, and they are in mystery box triangle. So that's what will happen in each of the different scenarios, and it'll have you pull different things for different stuff. I'm not going to spoil any more of that as far as the different miniatures go. But then down here in this box here, we'll just kind of zoom out just a little bit there. This is actually really well put together, and I want to make note of this. I'm going to actually do a lot of comparisons to Gloomhaven with this. And this is one of the areas where it sort of beats out Gloomhaven. Let's not make it a competition so much, but just say this is something maybe they've taken and seen what happens with Gloomhaven and then kind of addressed it, possibly. So you got your different rule books, encounter books, all this kind of stuff, the stuff that you will read. I'm not going to show any of this. This is for some of that. There's story books and stuff like that for reading that. And then they have this little nice thing here, which tells you, very first thing you do when you open the box is how to pack the box back away. So here you have one board. This is double-sided. And you have here some envelopes, because there are some envelope stuff. So here's a map of the city. I won't unfold that for you. But you'll be traveling around this map here during the story mode and possibly other maps. And then here you have some of the other figures here, which I'll show you. You've got some like NPC figures in this box here. And then you have all of the different 12 hero figures there, which I'll show you in a second. And then you have this thing here, which has a lot of nice things. So you've got some of these cards here, which are used, you can use these in lieu of rolling dice. You can flip these cards, so there's different colored dice that match these, but you can flip the cards instead, or you can do both actually. These are for helping you track during the story mode, which I'll show you. You've got a lot of these other books and journals and things here in the middle. So all this stuff kind of packs away. I put some pencils in here that don't come with the game. You've got compartments on either side here for some of your tokens and dice and all that. And then you have these boxes here for very quickly finding, you know, certain cards. So here we have some of the encounter cards here. These are all shuffled up there. And so they're very easy to go and find those different things, you know, as you need to find items or, you know, rules for things or special things or ally cards. And then there are different envelopes here. So let me just grab them. Here's the War Bear, which one of my friends is playing. And inside here are some tokens and some cards. Each of the different heroes has a different deck, and you can upgrade those, and there's little divider cards in here. So this is all the cards the War Bear will ever need. And there's a divider card in there so you can kind of remember what you kept and didn't keep. So all of that is in here. And then there is also, see if I can find it, this big one here. This is the free company. This is for the whole group. There's lots of extra decks here. So you have like a general backpack where you carry kind of communal items. You have some event decks as you go through the story. It'll tell you to add certain cards to different event decks, because you maybe have different encounters along the way where you meet this person, so maybe they come back to bite you or to help you later on, and all those kind of things. And there's injury decks and all those things in here that are kind of specific to the whole party, and then some other tokens and stuff like that. And then down here we've got 2 trays. And this is silly and it's a little bit of overkill, but it's really awesome how this works. Here, oops, I got it upside down. This is a little tray here. Let's not try to spill all of these tokens everywhere. Just being extra careful. So this is nice to set off to the side, because you will make use of a lot of these different tokens. Like you can get reroll tokens, upgrade tokens to upgrade your dice or cards. This is like a cycle card to help cycle your cards that you play, armor tokens, health tokens, all that kind of stuff. So this is all right here. So the game is not super token heavy, but everything you need is right there in that little box there. And then in here you have some different terrain. Now you can get 3D models of some of this terrain. They're like little tree stumps and houses and stuff like that, but I don't have that. But these will come in the game. And then it's some money tokens, and then you've got here a whole bunch of different stuff. So here's one of the heroes, for example. Here is the Cur, and you can see they got a player board. So each of the different 12 heroes has a player board. And then also in the stack here, there's all the different bosses and encounter rules, which I'll just show you the first one to kind of give you an idea of it. But there's also like a little bit of backstory and everything here. So everything I just wanted to highlight is very well organized, very easy to pack. Even on that first sheet that I showed you, it tells you how to pack everything away. Once you do it once, you get the hang of it, and it's very easy to set up the game. I mean, it's quite a big sort of epic experience, but it's very not so epic to set up and pack away, you know, more than in your average kind of board game. So let's take a look at some other stuff here. So these are the 12 heroes, and one of the first things I'm going to be doing after this video is I'm going to be gluing these. Now you don't have to glue any of the miniatures, and you really don't have to glue these, but they have an option to actually swap out weapons. So if I pull this guy out here, well, let me just pull, I can pull his head off, see there? But everything is sort of push fit, and for the most part, all of this stuff stays together. Let me see if I can find a troublesome one here. Maybe this guy. Yeah, there we go. See, his arm just fell off there. So you can get these little packs to swap out, whoops, weapons there. So his arm comes off, I could swap out different weapons. I don't really care about that. I just need this guy as a representation, you know, of who he is and where he is on the board. And then my cards and everything that I play will, you know, represent his skills and everything. So one thing I'm going to do now is glue everything together now, because I've decided I don't want to get that extra stuff. I'm just going to glue these, and eventually I'll paint them. But that's how these are. But these are really cool figures. I mean, everything is like, I think it's like 32 millimeter scale. So they're quite large, and they are relatively detailed. You know, if we're talking model comparison, no, not quite up there with like Games Workshop or Cool Mini or not, but pretty close, pretty close. Right up there with definitely a nice quality Fantasy Flight game right up there. But again, I got to paint them and stuff, so you know, we'll see how that goes. Now the next thing I want to show you here is we have here some storybooks here. We've even got like a little journal. And then while we're at it, I'll show you the first thing you're going to do is you're going to make up a free company sheet here, and you'll track some of your progress and different abilities and stuff that you unlock on this. And then you also have a map. So the story mode so far, I've not finished the campaign, I'll talk more about that in the review, is moving around to various different locations here. And these are numbered locations that will kind of match, you know, certain entries in that book. I do want to show you the app. And I would say if you're sort of an anti-app person, I don't think you necessarily should be here with this one, because it does not really like intrude. It helps enhance the game. But just to kind of give you the sense here, let's do, I don't want to mess up my campaign, so I'm going to go here. I reset the chapter 1 here. So if I say,
green mud sucks at your boots, every stride a challenge as you trudge through the rain. Your hands grip the thick iron cable of the wire road, pulled taut through rings, sunken into the trunks of hideous trees. For days now, it has been the only evidence of humanity's existence in the deep wood.
Right? That sounds amazing. And so as you go through the campaign here, and like I said, there's tutorials there, all the videos and stuff I talked about are in the app. But as you go through the app, you also will reference the location numbers that you pick. There'll be a different narration, different choices. You might roll dice or flip cards to do some different checks. You will track a lot of that on these boards here. These aren't really spoiler or anything, but as you sort of pull location tokens off of this map, you'll mark these as you move along, and these will sort of either trigger events or leave bonuses unlocked. If you complete the story mode in a timely manner, maybe you get bonuses going into the encounter or bonuses at the very end after you've done the encounter. And there are all kinds of sorts of RPG types of things. So the way to kind of look at it here, from my perspective, is you have sort of a game master, dungeon master. They're going to spend about 45 minutes to an hour kind of taking you through, sort of leading you through the story, and then you're going to throw down in a big epic boss battle. So it really touches a lot of those RPG-esque types of things with different tests and checks, but of course it's not quite as free form as, you know, some encounters might be as you kind of advance in some of these other RPGs like Dungeons and Dragons and so on. So it does, but it really does a nice sort of, you know, not deep RPG experience, not a 10-foot deep experience or a 20-foot deep experience, but like, you know, 5-6 feet deep, kind of the deep end of the pool, but not that wide ocean of the RPG style experience. Now, once you get through the story part of it, then it's going to tell you to break out this map, which I'll get to. And so this is just one map, just a double-sided map. And you probably can't see really with this sort of lighting here, but you can notice when you play. So you can see it's different hexes that you move around in. And there's different little reference points, like you got that little skull there, and then you've got the directionals up here, so you got northeast, east, and so on, which will come into play as you sort of kind of resolve tiebreakers in terms of where things might get deployed or move and that kind of stuff. You'll have terrain out here and so on. And of course you'll have your big monster, which will come out. You'll have some of their minions over here that will get deployed in certain ways, and they'll move around and interact with you. Now, one thing to note is most of the big monsters here have a little directional arrow there. You can see that. So you can easily tell, you know, which way it's facing, which is its front, and so on, which I'll explain here in just a minute. And so you'll have a big old epic kind of combat with, you know, some of your figures. Maybe you got the war bear, maybe you got the priest out here. You're always going to have 4 characters, you know, in play. So even if you played solo, you're still going to use 4 of the different characters. So I grabbed the warbear earlier, so let's take a look at them. I haven't been playing this character, my buddy has, so we'll see what he's got going on in here. Okay, so here's kind of what your player space will look at with your player board and so on, and different tokens and cards and things like that, and of course your miniature, which will be on the board. So let's look at a couple of things. So first of all, we've got some money here. They have 3 iron, that's the name of the money. Money's pretty much shared. When there's an expense, players can kind of collectively, you know, spread the money around and buy different things. You've got some different tokens here for upgrading, rerolling dice, and then also transitioning cards, which you're going to play kind of around this player board. Let's move him out of the way. So right now, currently in, what did he name him here? Loose Fang. This is the War Bear. You've also got here, this is your sheet here. So they start permanently with a redraw token and an empowered token. So every scenario, every game, we've unlocked that as we've leveled up the characters. And the characters level up basically with the scenarios. There's no like experience points or anything like that. You just kind of automatically level up, and there's some period of time where you level up the items and stuff like that. And you can buy items from shops and things. So you've got a spot here to kind of put your tokens here. Here's your might tokens, which I'll explain. Here's your defense, which I'll explain. Everybody's always going to have 6 hit points most of the time to start. Even bosses, but bosses will have multiple locations with 6 hit points. And most of the minions, like these little rats, will have, usually like 1 hit points. And then you have this animus tokens here. So you can see you regen 6 from left to right every round. And in real tiny writing down here, it says you have a max of 9. So we've got 9, we've regenerated 6 to start the game. And so you spend these to do different things. So you spend 1, you can move 1 space. But you can also spend them to play cards. So you can see here, this costs you 4 to play this card. And so this is your hand of cards. And you can see a couple things about it here. So here we have, that means it's a starter card. But in the case of this character, we have leveled up. So we've now swapped out cards with our level 2s, and then as you get to higher levels, you'll start to swap them out. I think level 5 is the next time that we'll do it. You can see one thing here. So here is the animus cost to play. So these each cost 4, that costs 0. And then here is kind of the battle flow spot that the card will go into. So when you level it up, if you replace a battle flow 2 card, you've got to replace it with another battle flow 2 card. So you always have kind of the same sort of structure to your deck. So when you play, let's say we play this card here, we'd spend our 4 animus, move that down here, and we'd play this card here. So if we zoom in just a little bit, you can see there's 1, 2, over on this side we have 3, and then down here we have 0. So we would play this to the 1 slot right there. And so you do it its effect, usually let you move, attack, so on. Now the next time we play a card to this slot, you'll take and move all of the cards in that slot to the next number down, and then at the end of the round you're going to pick up anything in the 0 spot. So it could work something like this. Let's say here we played this one, that's a 1. We played another one up here into, let's say, the 2 slot there, and then maybe we play another card up there into the 2 slot. And so that will push everything down here, and then we do another one to the 1, and that would push all of these down, so we'll get these back. So these have kind of a longer cooldown on them in a way, and then that's kind of how you kind of cycle through your actions. You got your sort of animus or kind of mana cost, your resource cost to play the card, and then you have your cooldown in here. And so that's why you have to kind of have an even number of these to kind of keep things cycling through. And everybody also has some of these 0 ones here. So even though you played them this round, you'll get them back next round. Now the other thing these cards can do here, let's take a look at a couple of things. So this card costs 0, but we played it in the 3 spot over here. And you can either do this top part or this bottom part. So you can see this here, this says, ignore one of the enemy mights cards, or this attack costs blah, blah, blah. So you can play it as an attack, but also if you see this, you can play it as a reaction to the boss or their minions when they react. And so you can play this kind of out of turn as a reaction. The other thing you can do is also play it for this defense to beef up your defensive value there. And in that case, you do play to this slot. And if there was any cost, you would ignore that. And that's what that little icon means there. When you play it for defense, you can ignore that mana cost, just play it for defense, and then it'll start to cycle down as well, just like normal. Now, when you do attacks and you have defense and things, that all is going to kind of come from some of your items here. So let's take a look at some of our items. So you might play a card to trigger an attack, but how do you know how your attack's going to work? Well, you have slots for items, and these will just be kind of off to the side. You can always have 1 armor, 2 hands worth of weapons, and then you can have like a gear thing, which could be like a potion or something like that, some kind of trinket. Now, a couple of things you can see here. So we've got 2 yellow cubes on the items that we have in front of us. So that allows us to have the 2 might tokens, and those are just there kind of as a reminder, and you can kind of see that there might be other abilities that mess with that. But that means we can roll 2 yellow dice, or flip 2 yellow cards, which are sort of the equivalent. So that's for when we do checks and attacks and things like that. The other thing is here is the armor, so we'll add that armor to any other armor that we might have, and we'll just put that there. And this is always the number you divide by the amount of damage coming to you, and the same with the monsters and things. So if 12 damage came at me, I would divide it by 4, so I would take 3 hit points for the damage and reduce that down to 3. So that's how armor is used. But again, remember, you can play this to add defense. You can also get temporary tokens and things like that to beef it up. Now when you attack or do any check at all, you can roll as many white dice or flip as many, let's get the cards out here, as many white cards as you want. And what these are is a representation, these card decks, as if there was 3 dice. So you can see there's some blanks, there's some 2s which have the crit and the 1. So there's 3 dice worth of faces in here. So if you want, you can say, I'm going to roll 2 white dice and flip 1 white card. And then I can roll up to as many others as are present on my might. So in this case, I get access to yellow dice. If I had red cubes there or black cubes there, I would get access to these. And these are sort of like the scale. The white ones are the worst ones, and they scale all the way up to the black ones, which are just the best ones there. Have the highest value, you know, more crits and stuff like that, less misses. So the rules actually allow you to be very flexible with that. The one thing it does say is for the monsters, they have to kind of their own deck, is to use just the cards for the monsters, but you could use dice if you want to just pure dice or a mixture like you said. That's how we've played it. We've just done all cards for the monsters, and then we just use these however we want, because as you see kind of the cards come out, you can see, oh, you know what, there's probably a lot of blanks in here left, or we've already gone through a lot of blanks. And then there's abilities and effects to kind of reshuffle all of these decks here, like so. And so you can kind of play with that. It adds a little bit of gamesmanship to kind of choosing, you know, which colored dice, how many to roll. The reason is, you're like, why wouldn't I just roll a whole bunch of dice? Well, if you ever roll 2 blanks, no matter what your threshold is or your target or how much damage you're trying to do, you're going to fail. Okay, so you said, okay, why don't I roll 10 white dice and however many colored dice that I want? Well, obviously because you got more chances to roll 2 blanks. So that's a real interesting mechanic here, balancing that with choosing cards versus dice and so on. Now it is worth noting that you do have crits here. So if you get a crit, then you can re-roll or roll an additional or flip an additional card of that color. Any blanks on there won't affect result. You also have you can get reroll tokens here. You can get these upgrade tokens, which allow you kind of 3 upgrades. So I could take 1 die and upgrade it 3 times. So I could upgrade this white all the way to a black, or upgrade 3 different whites all the way to yellows on each of those. So you can spend those. And if you do roll a miss in combat, now not in the story mode, but let's say you rolled a miss in combat, any tokens that you spent for that roll, you'll get back. And then you get your choice of 1 other upgrade token, because missing is bad. You don't want to miss. So it gives you what this thing is called determination. So your character becomes more determined to do better next time. So you get all the tokens you spent back, plus you get another token for next time. But that's kind of generally how that stuff's going to work. The only other thing here is you can get tokens here to battle flow the cards. So you can battle flow cards down from one spot to the next. These are kind of handy to get. But that's kind of the gist. You're going to be moving around and fighting the boss and trying to take out the boss. So let's show you a little bit about the first boss and kind of how the mechanics sort of work. And I will just say they're very asymmetrical. We've fought a few bosses now, and they're all very, very different. But we'll just show you kind of a quick example of this Rat Queen here. But before we do that, I almost forgot. I wanted to show you one thing that's called a companion sort of mode for your character. So if you were to play this solo, one thing you might do is control one of the characters fully, like I just showed you with the deck of cards, and then 3 other characters in companion mode. And so each of the characters comes with kind of this small card, and you can see they always get 2 animus. They have a very limited amount of actions you can do, and then they have these special abilities. So instead of a deck or hand of cards, you can upgrade to these different special ability cards and give you different choices in terms of what your special ability will be that you activate. So you always can spend 1, you can move 4, spend 1 to attack, spend 1 to do a special ability. So instead of trying to kind of quadruple fist 4 totally different decks of cards, you can just play 1, and then you have these sort of companions that you can work off to the side. And it's worth noting, if one of the characters gets eliminated, then you can pull up henchmen, which work just exactly like this, pretty much. That they can kind of play, they kind of fill in. So you're knocked out of the game, you're knocked out, but you're not like just sitting there waiting for the scenario to finish. You'll pull out some henchmen that you maybe will recruit along the way to kind of play as your character's recovering their wounds. And I'll talk more about actually kind of the turn structure in the final review. But I just wanted to highlight this little visual part here. So off to the side here, you'll have kind of the monster card and the special rules card for that monster, and they go by chapter. And then you've also got a special stage deck or an encounter deck here. You can see that by the chapter there. And you can also see you've got different stages. You got stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. So as it, the monster kind of moves along, the scenario moves along or takes damage, then the monster's going to change their behavior. And you've got spots here. You can see, so this, you've got 2 flanks, you got the head, you got the tail, right, and then the middle part of it, and they each have 6 hit points. You've got different rules, so special rules. There might be keywords that are on the cards that just kind of reference this. This is their attack, their defense. Any rules for the rats, so these are little minion rats, they're here, the rules for them. And then what's going to happen is you're going to have, this is always going to be face up. So before you start your turn, it's always going to be the players going, and then you're going to resolve here the stage deck of the boss. And you're always going to be able to see what they're going to do. So you're going to know, oh, it's going to do a tail whip, or it's going to do this or that. And then what's going to happen is you're going to resolve this. And so, in this case, it might spawn some rats. Monster's going to move certain ways. It's going to do certain attack. It's going to target people. And it's going to be based on this. Usually it's going to target the closest person by default. And then it kind of does its thing. And then next, it'll go over here. Then you'll see the next one. It'll come up. And then as you start to damage it and start to pull these off, then it's going to start to upgrade the stage deck faster. So as you go along, if you're not doing any damage to it, it's eventually going to get to stage 2, but it'll jump to stage 2 in this case when you have 2 dice or 2 locations removed. And then it'll jump to stage 3 once you get to 4, and then in this case, it'll only have 1 left. So that will act as a way to jump the stage, or just naturally going through it. Now, a couple things to note here. If we zoom in, as you remove the hit point dice from these locations, you're going to weaken their attacks. So you can see here, this attack here has kind of a mouth symbol here on that attack. So if we had removed this one, you can see we've removed its mouth symbol. That's going to degrade the strongest die of that attack if this symbol matches a location that you have removed that for. So the mouth attack is going to be a little bit weaker. The other thing to notice is whoever removes this, does that final bit of damage, that's going to trigger the card that's right there. So this card's going to trigger, bam, and they're going to always target the person who did that final damage to them based on, the card here. And then that's going to happen, and then this one's going to flip up, and you'll be able to see that. You'll be midway through the round, but you're going to be able to see what they're going to do. That's still going to happen at the end after all the players have activated. So you're going to kind of balance that, timing when they're going to get kind of that double attack there. And it's possible, theoretically with some AoE attacks or some other different things to have, 2 of these trigger at once. And so you do the same thing, kind of resolve it there. And if that triggers a stage change, you're going to do the stage change first, and then so they'll kind of upgrade or maybe get weaker depending on how the monster works. And then you'll do that there. So that's how that kind of works. And they all do different stuff. I'm not going to get too much in the details. It's all pretty explanatory. Some of the keywords here are explained in the back of the rule book. You have to kind of look that up because it really does do some funky things. Like so far, all of the different monsters and bosses and everything do play out, I would say, very significantly different from each other. So once you finish the scenario, whether you won or you lost, there's some different steps to sort of upgrade your characters, retry the scenario, all that stuff. I'm not going to get too much into that right now. It's very procedural. It's very simple, but I'll just be reading you a bullet point list of items. And then you'll move on to the next chapter, and then it will give you opportunity to upgrade your items and stuff based on the chapter. So in a similar way that there is encounter decks per chapter, there's item decks that are thematic to where you happen to be in the story and what's available to you and all that kind of stuff. So it kind of naturally upgrades. There's common items that you can get that you can go to stores and buy and stuff like that. And there's unique items that you can get that usually will have something to do with kind of the encounter that you just had. And so they will kind of make thematic sense and go right along with that. They're not very generic. Whereas the common items are, your generic fantasy armor and weapons and stuff. So that's kind of your general overview. Let's go to my talking head. Okay, so that's a brief overview of Oathsworn. And a couple things, like I mentioned during the walkthrough, I'm going to do a lot of comparing to Gloomhaven. And I'm also going to have a lot of spoilers, not a lot, a few spoilers at the end. I will totally timestamp it. I will mention it again before I get into spoilers. Because long story short, I really, really love this game. It's fantastic, it's great. But to kind of, not that it's my job to do this necessarily, but to kind of sell you on why I really enjoy this game, I need to talk about like specific stuff that happened. So if you don't want to watch that, I mean, I appreciate that. I wouldn't really want to watch it either. I'm not going to spoil anything kind of deep into the campaign. I'll talk about why in a second. But it's early. It's in the first couple of chapters. And it has to do with kind of the uniqueness of the bosses and stuff like that. So I will talk about some just kind of moments that happened. It was really cool, really memorable, thematic, and that kind of thing. And just know that, that, in my opinion, is what they were. And so if you want specifics, they'll be at the end. So, I kind of talked about player count already, because you can play it with 4 characters only. I talked about the play time. It's like an hour for the story mode, 2 hours for the encounter mode, give or take. It definitely gets quicker as we've played it more. The first game we played of it, the first scenario was the longest for sure, just because we were kind of trying to make sure we're doing everything right and going through and all that stuff. But in terms of player count, though, I've played it with 4 people and also just myself. And I prefer it with 4, and I'll talk about why in just a second. I played it twice solo, and I tried it 2 ways. One I actually wouldn't recommend. I thought it would be kind of cool. I basically did all 4 characters as the companion mode, instead of having one character fully equipped or whatever. That I didn't really like that. It was just not really enough going on, because you kind of miss out on like all the great stuff in the game. But playing one character with the deck and then 3 others was really cool. I really liked that part of it. So I thought maybe, just even that would be like too much going on, but that was perfect. It was really good solo, and I'm kind of wanting because my group gets together to play this now pretty often, and I kind of want to tear through it. So I'm trying to be not selfish in a way. So I can't speak to 2 and 3 players, but I'm sure it's fine. I can speak to 1 player and 4 players, and it really, really works. And let's get into more of the my third pillar, which is kind of like, comparing this to other games. I'm probably going to harp on Gloomhaven too much, but this is like a lot of other games. I could reference Kingdom Death, where you have kind of structurally it's probably more like Kingdom Death than Gloomhaven, because in Kingdom Death you had kind of I forget what it was called, like a campaign mode where you do some bookkeeping and stuff would happen to your little village or your little civilization that you were creating, and then you have a boss fight. This is very similar. You got kind of a story, you're in these different places and you're doing different things, interacting with NPCs, and then you have a boss fight, and then you go back and you go do boss fight, and then you go back and do that. So the structure of that is a lot like Kingdom Death, and the unique decks for the different bosses and stuff like that is a lot like Kingdom Death. But the vibe of Kingdom Death is like a whole other completely different animal. This is really cool because a lot like Gloomhaven, it's a fantasy world, but it's also a very unique fantasy world, which is Gloomhaven. It's not like a Dungeons and Dragons style fantasy world. The theme of this actually reminds me of another game I've talked about quite a bit called Rangers of Shadowdeep, which is a miniatures game, not a board game, where you have this kind of encroaching sort of mysterious shadow force. In this case, it's nature sort of encroaching and just sort of eating civilization in a way. That's how you're introduced to it anyway. And, that kind of vibe, whereas Rangers Shadowdeep has the Shadow Deep, which is coming and trying to take over, and it's kind of a mysterious nebulous force. So it's a very unique world in this way, which is really, really neat. Now the card play and the turn structure, which I said I would wait till now to talk about, is awesome, because what happens is there's no turns. There's no like I go and then you go and then I go and then you go, or I do all of my actions and then you do all your actions and then I do. This is like, oh, I'm gonna move. I'm gonna move and I do this and then I'm gonna do that and then you go, and then they're gonna go and I'm gonna set up. I'm gonna try to spin the monster so it's pointed this way, and now you can backstab it or whatever, right? Because now I've rotated its front, or I've set up like a buff over here or something like that, or I've done this. And you can take actions in whatever order you want, and that actually fixes or it solves the whole like alpha player problem, because it's like, you know what, this is what I'm going to do on my turn. Now there's some discussion about what's optimal and what you want to do, but you can also be like, it's weird because you're like thinking and then acting all together, and it really kind of moves and coalesces around the table. And after we played a few games with the different characters, we all kind of know what each other can do as well. And we're like, oh, we got to set up Billy so he can do this cool combo. And because they're going to be in a position where they can attack this certain flank or this location on the monster. And maybe I've got to go do this other task that's not related to the monster, because like I said, it's very asymmetrical. And, you know, I could do this thing. So, you know, I'm going to be doing that. You could be doing it at the same time as me, as long as the actions don't trigger something that you would have to, the order of operations matter. There's a lot of times and opportunities for simultaneous play, and that makes it just feel so naturally. It just breaks it out of that whole board game structure, the whole turn structure. There's kind of regimented kind of rails that sometimes, you know, a game has to live on just because of its nature, you know, because they're inanimate pieces that just sit there until you do something. But this breaks that. This breaks that paradigm that's just been around forever, you know, where it's like turn, action, where it's like a blend of that with simultaneous actions. And that's just really, really cool. I just can't get over that. So the other part where I would kind of harken it back into Gloomhaven is the way those cards work, where you play a card into kind of a cooldown slot, and then you kind of move them down as you play other cards that kind of trigger that battle flow effect and all that kind of stuff. And so just that whole kind of, again, you layer that on top of what I was just talking about with the turn structure, it just feels very, very fluid and structured in that way. Whereas Gloomhaven had that cool kind of thing where you kind of, you made a choice and then you're like, oh, okay, your initiative's higher and this and that, and then you kind of have this thing. And so it has the same kind of thing where Gloomhaven was kind of messing with initiative, right? But this just does it in such a way that is less handcuffed than Gloomhaven in some ways. And you still have that kind of flow of activity as well, where Gloomhaven had some of that with some of the magic tables and stuff like that. But this is just a much more fluid and evolving sort of an organic, atmosphere. And so that's great. So the other part that's really great is the decks of cards and the dice. And the game is like, do whatever you want. You want to flip 2 cards and roll 2 dice and whatever, or do all dice or all cards, then do it. And it doesn't even interrupt the game at all. It makes for really it just kind of feeds that little sort of Euro efficiency card counting thing, in your brain. So you want to fool with that, but your group could just be like, forget the cards, we're going to roll dice all day long because that's what we like to do. Or we hate dice and we're going to do cards. Do what you want to do, or mix them up. It's like a freeing, like a loosening of the shackles of some of these kind of expectations that you have coming into the game. Really, really neat. Before I'm trying to talk about a couple more things, I think, before I get into it with the spoilers. The one thing I like is it's not token heavy. That's cool. There's some tokens. It's not a crap ton of tokens. Depending on the game, that's one thing. I've been doing this for a while. And if I open a box and there's like a lot of tokens, it depends. Sometimes though, I'm like, it's like, okay, how I got to organize all this, just because I've done a lot, But there's other games where I'm excited because I can kind of tell what they are and what they mean, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be for this and this is for that, and I'm get excited. And other times I'm like, why is there 8 pounds of cardboard in here? It just kind of depends. But what I like about this is it's a very efficient sort of space in terms of all of like the ergonomics, the physical actual mechanics that you're doing. It's just cards and this and moving stuff, and then you got a couple little tokens there, just kind of as little, reminders and things. Not a ton, it's not like tokens everywhere. Like that's some of these games are like, we have 4 billion tokens in our game. Well, this is not a good or bad thing. Don't market the game and say you have a lot of tokens, or you have like tons of decks of cards. This has a lot of cards, but it's all organized like I showed you at the beginning of the walkthrough, and these little dividers, it all comes with the game. It's all easy to pull out once you go from chapter 1 to chapter 2. You're like, okay, here's the chapter 2 items, here's the chapter 2 decks. Boom, pack the other ones away, pack the other stuff in your little envelopes. It's like they cared that you were going to have to set this up they're like, you know what, these people are going to have to set this up and pack this away. Let's make it as easy on them as we can. And that thought of all of that is just like, man, they cared. They cared enough to do that. Now, in terms of storage space, obviously, if you're getting this one, I would obviously recommend the miniature one because it's more visually appealing, I think, than standees. I've not seen the standees, so I don't know what they look like. Maybe they look amazing. But it's neat that they pack stuff away, so when you pull out the one boss, you're like, ooh, what was this boss? This is going to be, well, how's this one going to work and be different than the others? You must have to repeat it just based on the amount of stuff that's in here. The one thing I will say is, as we played through it 4 chapters, and I played the first chapter 2 more times. So now, again, this is almost like a first impressions kind of thing. I probably should have prefaced that a little bit up front. But they had sent me this as a review copy a little bit ago, and then we had the group together. There was COVID in the group, and then I got sick. They got the flu. And then so it kind of broke it up. So I was hoping to get like more through the campaign before their Kickstarter, so I could, I wasn't even sure if I was going to like the game, first of all. But so I wish I could get more through it. But I want to talk about replayability a little bit before I talk some of the spoiler stuff. Now, the replayability is maybe the one weak point, but I'm not sure. Now that I've played it a few times and I've replayed a scenario a couple of times, I don't know that it's going to be a problem. Now, one thing that the game does is if you play through the campaign, you play the 21 scenarios, they do have a quick start mode where you can basically skip the story mode. And to me, that's the one part that would not necessarily be replayable, because those beats and those little plot twists or whatever are not going to be surprising. They're not going to be fresh. They're going to be redundant. They're going to be, been there, done that. But the combats and all that stuff, and there's 12 different characters, is something that you would be able to replay. I mean, there's plenty of games like, Warhammer Underworlds and other battle games and stuff that is not tied to a campaign or a story arc. And so you could go and just set up and play through the campaign again and do the quick story. I can't remember, the quick start mode, whatever it's called. And there's a little it's like a page, like a couple of paragraphs really of reading. But it's like, hey, go do this and do this check, and then go do that and do this check. And then it will give you some of those same bonuses and negative effects that you would have had playing through the story, but you don't have to kind of sit through all of that. So you can do that, but there's also why would you have to play them in order again? You could go back and it's like, well, let's play that monster again, and then let's use these other characters, because there's rules for auto leveling up characters to get to chapter 8 or chapter 10. And so it has all that built in. So I don't know why this is not totally replayable, because the combat and stuff, the story is cool. It's neat. It gives you kind of a setup, and it's cool because it's I don't know, it's like a presentation. It's like a whole pageantry to kind of introduce the boss and, get you all kind of lathered up and ready to go for this big encounter. It just adds all of this meaning into the actual game. And so you definitely do want to go through, I think, at least once. But then they set it up and make it easy for you to go back and just play the battles again. And that's not to say if you were to play through the campaign and then, wait a year or so or plus, that you'd probably forget most of everything that happened, and you would just do the story again anyway. So I think the replayability actually is there. The one part where it's weak would be, going through the story full bore again. I think that would be a little tedious. But the app's nice. You listen to the guy's voice. It sounds beautiful. It's great. Okay, so the end. Spoilers are coming 100%. So big red flag, spoilers. But I just wanted to show you, because this is what just pushes the game way into the top. Okay, I had to take a drink there. So there's been a couple of interesting things. I'm going to talk about, I think it was chapter 2 and 3, if I remember right. So this is going to spoil. Okay, this is going to spoil stuff that happens. So turn the video off if you don't want this. So this, the second chapter, there is I think you say satyr or satyr. It's like one of those giant demonic looking goat-legged people with like a Pied Piper kind of thing. And so in that one, there's just one giant boss, and there's no minions, there's no little guys running around. And it's all basically his cards. And his cards, he's got another deck of cards in addition to his encounter deck. And what he does is he plays his little flute and messes with the characters. And so one thing that happened, and it was funny, extra funny, because we were already teasing the war bear character, which I showed you. And, we were making jokes, because it's a bear. Just run with that. Whoever you are, you might get that one. But it was a bear, so we were making bear jokes. And at one point, the satyr made a thing. So I can't remember which character it was. It wasn't mine. So the bear character gave a piggyback ride to one of the other characters, and they ran off the side of the map. And it totally took us out of position to, for where we wanted to be set up for the following turn. But it was just ridiculous. So it was that was one of the examples of all these hallucinatory types of things that this monster was doing to us. One, it made a character dance, in place. And so they kind of they didn't lose a turn, but it was kind of just took them out of position again. And just a lot of cool things like that. And I was like, oh man, that is this really cool. So the creativity, with these monsters and stuff is just so neat. So the third one I want to talk about was, which is the third chapter, is, I can't remember, it's a giant worm. And so the worm comes in three big pieces. And again, there's no minions with this one. And so in addition to kind of the locations like you saw with the rat queen, then you could hit the head, the midsection, and the tail. And each one of those had separate locations on it. So yeah, I think they each had 4 locations. So you had a total of 12 locations, but you're either attacking the tail, the head, or whatever. And so that was really cool. And so when it would move, you would take and move the tail to where the midsection was, the midsection would move where the head is, and then the card would tell you kind of where the head would end up. So it was kind of moving through the board, undulating up and down in the forest. And one of the things this worm could do was eat people. And you also had these other NPCs and stuff in that particular scenario that you had to rescue. So actually, in the last half of that, I spent most of my time rescuing because I play the priest. And it hinted pretty strongly, I think it even said directly, I don't remember. But the more people you save, the better kind of reward you got at the end. So we were saving them and stuff, so it could eat them. But we had saved enough that it was like, oh, it's going to eat one of us. And it's just the neatest thing, because we had this legit discussion of okay, so if we do this, we can let it eat Billy. In this case, we can say we'll let it eat Billy, and then Francesca, you can come over here and then hit it for that, but we got to let it eat Billy to do that. So just having that discussion of and Billy was like, oh yeah, let it eat me, and then we could do that. Because when you're inside its belly, you can actually, it kind of wipes out what you can do, but then you can attack it once per turn, and you just make an attack. And so you can hit it, and then you spill out back onto the board and stuff like that. I mean, it's just these kinds of things that it does, that's just not something you see in a dungeon crawl or whatever. You know what I mean? That kind of creative sort of thing. Now in Kingdom Death Monster, there was a lot of that stuff. So again, this kind of is a lot like Gloomhaven in some ways, but also a lot like Kingdom Death Monster, where you have this kind of boss battling thing with very creative decks and stuff like that. And it just really adds to kind of a real simple core game where you're playing cards and all that and doing things, but then you have these glorified event decks that really just kind of mix things up and mix up how you approach them strategically. And so that kind of gets back to the replayability of okay, well, I had, the Warbear this time, but what if I had, the Witch or the Warden, and I had those together and they combo together and all these different things. So anyway, that's the end of the spoilers. I'm sure most of you probably turned it off, but maybe you've played through this game and you've had similar experiences like that. So it's really, really neat. If they turned it off, then those of you that have played it are still here, or those who don't care about spoilers are still here. This to me is a total Gloomhaven killer. I mean, it just really is. I mean, Gloomhaven had 90 scenarios. This has 20 plus 1 or whatever. I mean, I never finished Gloomhaven. I know people that have. I know they have zero desire. They had zero desire to almost finish it because it was just too long and tedious. This is 20, and this is doable. We're going to finish this. Unless something horrible goes wrong. And then you will hear about it in my end of year video if this does not show up, which I'd be surprised. This is going to show up near or at the top. And there's a lot of games that this year I've played. I'm like, oh, this is going to be the game of the year. And this is another one. I'm like, well, this just blew all of those out of the water. So yeah. So there you go. That's Oathsworn. Take a look. Kickstarter links below. You probably, if you're watching at this point, you probably already backed it. Thanks.